The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dense forest. When the blip appeared on the radar, a bright speck moving rapidly through the atmosphere, the military personnel on the ground were initially unconcerned. It was just another routine day at the training facility, but that blip soon became a source of growing anxiety as it descended at an alarming rate. Lieutenant Sarah Evans squinted at the screen as the blip started to lose altitude. Her heart raced. This was not part of the schedule, and something about the trajectory sent a chill down her spine. This was no ordinary flight. An unauthorized vessel was entering their airspace, and she quickly relayed the information to her commanding officer, Colonel Thompson. "Get a team ready," she barked. "We need to find out what that is." The command center was a flurry of activity as the team assembled. They loaded gear into vehicles and prepared for a possible emergency response. They navigated through the rugged terrain towards the last known location of the crash. The closer they got, the more the forest grew eerily silent. Only the crunching of leaves beneath their boots broke the stillness. When they finally reached the crash site, they were greeted by a scene of destruction. The alien ship was a battered hulk, smoldering in the underbrush. Its metallic surface was dented and blackened from the crash. The smell of burnt metal mixed with the earthy scent of the forest. Evans led her team cautiously forward, weapons drawn, eyes scanning for any potential threats. But what they found was not what they expected. A group of small green beings emerged from the wreckage, their skin shimmering like wet moss, and their oversized eyes wide with fear. They stumbled forward, weak and disoriented. "Please help us," one of them cried, its voice high-pitched and trembling. "We mean no harm. We are Calathans fleeing from the Zarkan Empire." The name struck a chord deep within Evans. A shiver ran down her spine. The Zarkan Empire was infamous across the galaxy, a ruthless regime known for its brutal conquests of weaker species and their systematic annihilation of entire civilizations. She had read about them in classified reports, but never thought she would encounter their victims in person. "Why are they after you?" Evans demanded, lowering her weapon slightly to show a semblance of trust. "They hunt us for sport," the Calathan leader replied, its voice quavering with desperation. "We are considered inferior, but we have knowledge that could help you." The weight of its words settled over Evans like a heavy fog. She looked back at her team and could see the hesitation written on their faces. The humans were wary, viewing the Calathans with a mix of pity and skepticism. Just then a low rumble filled the air, and Evans' heart raced as she glanced at the sky. A Zarkan scout ship appeared, ominously silhouetted against the setting sun, its sleek form glinting with menacing intent. "We must go, they are coming," the Calathan urged, its eyes wide with fear. Without thinking, Evans signaled her team to fall back, but the Zarkan ship descended rapidly, casting a shadow over the clearing. The scout ship's engines roared to life, and with a crackle of energy, it scanned the area, its sensors searching for the very beings that had sought refuge on Earth. Evans faced a choice: protect the Calathans and risk confrontation with the Zarkans, or turn them away and ensure the safety of her team. She took a deep breath as the weight of her decision settled upon her. "Hold your position," she shouted to her team. "The Calathans need our help." As the Zarkan ship hovered above the treetops, its weaponry primed for action, Evans felt her resolve strengthen. The Calathans were not just refugees. They were potential allies in a universe that seemed determined to reject them, and she would do everything in her power to protect them. The Zarkan scout ship cast an ominous shadow over the clearing as it hovered silently, its sleek metallic surface reflecting the fading light. Lieutenant Sarah Evans felt her heart pound in her chest, the weight of her decision pressing heavily on her shoulders. She turned to the Calathans, their fragile bodies trembling with fear, and made a quick assessment of their situation. "We need to move quickly," Evans instructed her team, her voice steady despite the chaos brewing around them. "Get the Calathans to the vehicles, and keep an eye out for any Zarkan soldiers." Her team sprang into action, moving with a mix of urgency and trepidation. The Calathans were surprisingly agile despite their small size, and they hurried toward the nearby transport vehicles. Their wide eyes darted nervously around the clearing as they sensed the danger closing in. As they reached the vehicles, the Zarkan ship unleashed a low hum that vibrated through the air, followed by a flash of bright light. The ground trembled as a beam shot down from the ship, scanning the area. It seemed to linger on the Calethans, their unique biology evident even from a distance. Evans waved her team to hurry and squeezed into the front passenger seat of the lead vehicle. She glanced back at the Calethans, who were crowded together, visibly shaken. "Drive," she shouted to the driver as the Zarkan ship continued its ominous search. The vehicle lurched forward and tore through the underbrush, the trees whipping past in a blur behind them. The Zarkan ship followed, hovering with relentless precision. It emitted a chilling sound that echoed through the forest. "I can't believe this is happening," one of the soldiers muttered, staring wide-eyed at the rearview mirror. The Calethans huddled close together, whispering in their own language, their expressions a mix of fear and determination. Evans could barely make out their conversation, but the urgency in their voices was clear. "What do they know about the Zarkans?" Evans asked, hoping to get a grasp of their knowledge and the potential threat. The Calethan leader glanced at her, its oversized eyes glistening with emotion. "We have seen the Zarkans destroy worlds. They are merciless, and their technology is far superior to yours." The words hung in the air, heavy with dread. Evans felt a chill run down her spine as she focused on the road ahead. She needed a plan, and fast. Just then, a sharp warning beep echoed from the vehicle's dashboard. The driver glanced at Evans, panic etched on his face. "They're firing." Evans braced herself as the vehicle jolted under the impact of a blast from the Zarkan ship. She could see the trees ahead beginning to split apart as energy bolts tore through the underbrush. "Keep driving," she yelled. "We have to get to the base and alert command." The team navigated through the chaotic forest, the sounds of destruction echoing behind them. The Zarkan ship was relentless, and as they sped forward, it unleashed another volley of energy bolts, striking the ground around them. In the midst of the chaos, the Calethan leader spoke up. "We can help. Your technology is no match for theirs, but we can outsmart them." "What do you mean?" Evans asked as she focused on maneuvering the vehicle. "We have ways of creating distractions." The Calethans glanced at each other before continuing. "We can cloak ourselves and confuse their sensors. If we can reach the clearing ahead, we might be able to evade them." Evans considered the idea. She could sense the urgency in their words, and despite her skepticism, there was a glimmer of hope. It was a risk, but they had no other choice. "All right," she replied, gripping the edge of her seat. "Let's do it." The driver accelerated toward the clearing ahead as the Zarkan ship loomed closer, its weaponry primed and ready. The Calethans began to chant in unison, their voices rising above the roar of the vehicle. The air crackled with energy as they focused their abilities. Just as the Zarkan ship fired another blast, the clearing opened up ahead, revealing a wide expanse of land. With a final surge of effort, the Calethans unleashed their power. A shimmering wave of energy enveloped the vehicle, blurring their outline. Just as the energy bolt struck the ground where they had been a split second earlier, the Zarkans were momentarily confused, their sensors unable to lock onto the now camouflaged vehicle. Evans let out a breath. She hadn't realized she was holding the plan worked for now, but she knew the real fight was just beginning. The vehicle skidded to a stop in the clearing, the hum of the Calethans' energy field still crackling in the air as they emerged from their cloaking. Evans glanced around, breathing heavily, trying to regain her composure. The immediate danger seemed to have passed, but the sense of urgency remained palpable. "We need to regroup and assess our next move," Evans said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The Calethans huddled together, their oversized eyes scanning the surroundings, their expressions a mixture of relief and lingering fear. The leader stepped forward, its small frame trembling slightly. "Thank you for believing in us," the leader said, its voice quivered with emotion. "Your faith may have saved our lives." "We're not out of the woods yet," Evans replied, glancing toward the trees where the Zarkan ship had last been seen. Its engines roared ominously in the distance. "We must act quickly," the Calethan leader continued. "We know the Zarkans will send ground troops to search for us. They won't stop until they find their prey." As if on cue, the sound of marching feet echoed through the forest, growing louder with each passing moment. "We need to find cover," Evans urged, scanning the area for a place to hide. Over there, the Calathan leader pointed to a thicket of trees and bushes just beyond the clearing. Its voice was calm and authoritative despite the chaos. We can create a distraction to divert their attention. How? Evans asked, her brow furrowed. We can amplify our energy signature to create false readings. It will confuse their scanners and allow us to escape. Evans nodded, recognizing the merit in the plan. Let's do it then. We'll have to move quickly. The Calathans gathered in a circle, their hands clasped together as they began to chant in their melodic language. The air shimmered around them as their energy built and expanded, forming a radiant sphere that pulsed with a strange light. Just as the Zarkan soldiers emerged from the tree line, Evans could see their bulky silhouettes approaching, their armored suits glinting ominously in the fading light. Now, Evans shouted. The Calathans released their energy in a brilliant flash, a dazzling display that sent waves of light cascading into the sky. The Zarkan soldiers halted momentarily, their confusion palpable as they tried to comprehend the spectacle. In that brief moment of distraction, Evans seized the opportunity. Let's move, she commanded. The team dashed into the thicket as the Zarkan soldiers fumbled with their equipment, attempting to recalibrate their scanners. The trees and brush provided a semblance of cover, but Evans knew it wouldn't last long. Once they were concealed behind the foliage, Evans glanced back at the Calathans, who were visibly drained, but determined. We need to get to the nearest base to regroup and alert command. We can lead you there, the Calathan leader replied, its voice low but resolute. The journey through the forest was fraught with tension. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs heightened their anxiety. Each step felt like a countdown to an inevitable confrontation. The Calathans guided them expertly, weaving through the underbrush until they reached a narrow path that led deeper into the woods. We're close, the Calathan leader assured them, its eyes shining with determination. Suddenly, the sound of blasters firing erupted nearby, followed by the unmistakable sound of Zarkan troops shouting orders echoed through the trees. We need to move faster, Evans urged. The Calathans began to chant again, their voices rising above the chaos. They tapped into their remaining energy to cloak themselves once more, but it was clear their strength was waning. We can only maintain this for a short time, the leader warned, its breath coming in short gasps. Just hold on a little longer, Evans replied, pushing herself and her team to keep pace. They pressed on through the underbrush, the air thick with tension and uncertainty. But as they approached the edge of the forest, the sight of a military outpost came into view. We made it, Evans exclaimed, relief flooding her voice. But just as they broke through the tree line, a Zarkan patrol emerged, blocking their path, their weapons aimed squarely at the team. The Zarkans had tracked them down, and the moment of hope quickly turned into a new crisis. Put your hands up, the Zarkan commander barked, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Evans raised her hands, but she refused to show fear. Her heart raced as she prepared for what came next. The Calathans huddled closer together, their energy flickering like a candle in the wind. This isn't over, Evans thought. Determination surged within her as she prepared for the fight of their lives. The standoff in the clearing felt electric as the Zarkan patrol eyed the group with contempt. Evans could see the gleaming weapons aimed at them, and she instinctively took a step forward, trying to project an air of confidence despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. Lower your weapons, Evans called out, hoping to stall for time. We're not your enemies. The Zarkan commander laughed, a cold, humorless sound that sent chills down her spine. You think I would be swayed by the pleas of inferior beings? He sneered. Your fate was sealed the moment you chose to harbor these wretches. Evans felt a wave of anger wash over her. The Calathans were not inferior. They were survivors. They had knowledge that could change the balance of power. But how to convince the Zarkans of that, or even more importantly, how to survive this encounter? The Calathan leader stepped forward, its small frame shaking, but its voice steady. We seek refuge from your tyranny. It is the Zarkan Empire that is inferior, driven by fear and cruelty. The Zarkan commander's expression darkened, his eyes narrowed as he aimed his weapon at the Calathan leader. I will end you for your insolence. Before Evans could react, the ground shook with the sound of rapid footsteps as more Zarkan troops emerged from the shadows surrounding them. The patrol had been a diversion, and now they were trapped. "We need a plan," Evans thought frantically. As the Zarkans advanced, she glanced back at the Calathans. Their energy flickered and dimmed, but the determination in their eyes remained steadfast. Just then, one of the Calathans whispered something to the leader, who nodded, and understanding its gaze met Evans, and she felt a flicker of hope. "We can create a distraction," the leader said, "if you can buy us a moment." "What do you need me to do?" Evans asked, ready to do whatever it took. "Hold their attention," the Calathan leader instructed. "It's time to show them that we are more than just prey." Evans took a deep breath and stepped forward, hands raised, but heart racing with defiance. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady. "You may think you can intimidate us, but we will not back down." The Zarkan commander scoffed, but the other soldiers hesitated, glancing at each other in confusion. As she spoke, the Calathans began to chant once more, their voices rising in a harmonious crescendo. The energy around them began to shimmer and swirl, creating an almost hypnotic effect. "What are they doing?" one of the Zarkan soldiers muttered. "Distract them," Evans shouted as she lunged to the side, throwing herself behind a nearby tree. In an instant, the Calathans released their energy in a brilliant explosion of light that illuminated the clearing. It created a dazzling array of colors and sparks that filled the air, blinding the Zarkans momentarily. Evans seized the opportunity. While the Zarkans were distracted, she sprinted back to her team, signaling for them to follow. "Go now," she shouted. The Calathans darted past her, their energy illuminating the darkening forest. They moved with surprising speed and agility, their confidence surging as they tapped into their abilities. The Zarkan soldiers were recovering quickly, but the disarray had bought them precious time. As the Calathans led the way, Evans focused on navigating through the trees, adrenaline propelling her forward. They need to reach the military base, she thought, just a little further. The sounds of pursuit grew louder behind them, but the Calathans pressed on, their energy pulsating in the air. The leader called back to Evans, "We are close to the outpost." Evans felt a surge of hope, pushing her legs to move faster. She could almost taste freedom, the thought of safety invigorating her. But then a blast rang out behind them, striking the tree just inches from her foot. "Keep moving," she shouted. As they broke through the tree line into a small clearing, they spotted the outpost in the distance, its lights blinking steadily like a beacon of hope. "It's right there," the leader called out. Just as they turned to sprint towards the outpost, the Zarkan soldiers emerged from the tree line, weapons drawn and ready. The Calathan leader summoned its remaining energy, creating a protective barrier around them. "Just a little longer," the leader urged. Evans pushed herself harder. She could see the outpost guards now waving their hands in alarm at the sight of the oncoming threat. "Help us," she shouted. And just like that, everything hinged on the thin line of hope they had left as the Zarkan soldiers bore down on them. And their last chance for survival loomed before them. The sounds of chaos filled the air as Evans sprinted toward the military outpost, the Zarkan soldiers hot on their heels. The protective barrier created by the Calathan leader flickered and shimmered, but was not a permanent solution. She could feel the weight of their imminent capture pressing down on them, but the sight of the outpost offered a glimmer of hope. "Help us," Evans shouted again, desperation edging her voice. The guards stationed at the outpost had seen the commotion and rushed to the entrance, armed with rifles, and confusion etched on their faces. "What in the world is going on?" shouted a sergeant, gesturing for them to hurry. As the group neared the outpost, the Calathans drew strength from their energy and began to chant, their voices rising in intensity. This time their energy crackled in the air like static electricity. They formed a barrier of light around Evans and her team, holding back the Zarkan soldiers who stumbled in confusion. "Get inside now," Evans yelled, urging everyone forward. With a final surge, the Calathans released their energy, creating a blinding flash that engulfed the clearing. The Zarkans reeled back, shielding their eyes, as the humans rushed through the entrance of the outpost. Once inside, Evans turned to see the sergeant and a handful of soldiers awaiting them with guns aimed at the door. "Hold your fire," she shouted, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. The sergeant squinted at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What the hell is going on, Evans?" The Zarkans are chasing us, she gestured toward the entrance, where the light of the barrier was starting to fade. We need to prepare for an attack. The sergeant's eyes widened as he exchanged glances with his men. Then he nodded, his face hardening with resolve. All right, everyone, grab your gear. The outpost was a flurry of activity as soldiers moved swiftly to arm themselves and take defensive positions. Evans quickly relayed the situation. The Calathans who had entered behind her appeared exhausted, their energy reserves depleting, but their determination unyielding. You have to trust us, the Calathan leader said, its voice strained but firm. We can help you defend this base. Help us how? Evans asked, feeling the weight of their predicament settle heavily on her shoulders. We know their tactics, the leader replied. The Zarkans underestimate our kind, but we have fought against them before. We can create diversions, confuse their sensors. Evans exchanged a glance with the sergeant, who appeared torn between skepticism and desperation. Fine, the sergeant said, we'll give you a chance. The Calathans quickly took charge, demonstrating their advanced knowledge of the Zarkan technology and tactics. They worked alongside the human soldiers, explaining how to manipulate the defenses and create illusions to mislead their pursuers. We'll set up a perimeter, the sergeant instructed his team. Move out. As the soldiers prepared for the inevitable assault, Evans felt a mixture of fear and hope. She glanced at the Calathans, who were huddled together, whispering words of encouragement, their eyes glowing faintly with renewed energy. We will protect you, the leader assured her, its small hand reaching out to touch her arm. You must believe in us. With the soldiers positioned around the base and the Calathans ready to create their diversions, the atmosphere grew tense. Evans stood at the entrance, peering out into the growing darkness. The distant sounds of Zarkan troops moving through the forest grew louder, the rhythmic crunch of boots on the forest floor sending shivers down her spine. Then she heard it, a loud crack followed by the unmistakable sound of Zarkan voices barking orders. The attack was imminent. Prepare yourselves, Evans called out, steady. The Zarkan troops burst into view, their silhouettes cutting through the trees like shadows. Their weapons gleamed under the moonlight as they approached the outpost. Now, the Calathan leader shouted. The air hummed as the Calathans unleashed their energy, creating a series of dazzling lights that erupted in the forest, illuminating the area. The Zarkans hesitated, momentarily disoriented by the sudden burst of brightness. We need to take this opportunity, Evans urged. The soldiers opened fire, striking the first line of Zarkan soldiers. The clash of battle erupted as chaos descended. The Calathans darted between trees, their energy creating illusions that confused the enemy. It worked, Evans thought, exhilarated, as she saw Zarkans firing at phantoms, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. But then a blast struck the ground near her, sending her sprawling to the ground. She quickly scrambled back to her feet, her heart racing as she surveyed the chaos around her. We have to hold them back, Evans shouted, urging her soldiers forward. The fight was just beginning, and as the Calathans and humans stood side by side, they knew that their combined strength was their only hope against the formidable Zarkan Empire. The battle raged outside the outpost as the Zarkan soldiers pushed forward. Their relentless advance met with the coordinated resistance of Evans's team and the Calathans. The air crackled with energy and gunfire, blending into a cacophony of survival and defiance. Evans fought alongside her team, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she fired her weapon at the advancing Zarkans. The Calathans darted around her, their small forms weaving in and out of the chaos, creating bursts of light and energy that momentarily disoriented the enemy. Focus on the defenses, the sergeant shouted as he rallied his soldiers. Form a line and hold your ground. Evans could see the determination on the faces of her comrades, the fear mixed with an unwavering resolve. They were fighting not just for their lives, but for the lives of the Calathans who had placed their trust in them. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed from the forest as a Zarkan warship emerged from the treetops. Its massive form blotted out the moonlight as it descended, cannons primed and ready to fire. We need to get everyone inside the outpost, Evans shouted, realizing that the warship would change the tide of the battle. The Calathans instinctively gathered together, their energy flickering with intensity as they prepared to create a shield, but the leader's expression was strained and worried. "We can't hold for long," the leader said, its voice trembling. "We need to distract them. We can't protect against a ship." Evans felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she weighed their options. "We'll have to take it down ourselves," she said, urgency driving her words. "How?" the sergeant asked, his brow furrowing. "We don't have the firepower." "But we have the Calathans," Evans replied, catching the leader's gaze. "We can use your energy to create an opening." The Calathan leader nodded, though its eyes reflected doubt and fatigue. "We can try, but it will require all of our strength." The sergeant motioned for his soldiers to fall back to the entrance of the outpost and regroup. "Listen up," he yelled. "We're going to distract that warship and cover the Calathans while they do their thing." As the soldiers gathered around Evans and the Calathans, she could feel the weight of their gaze. "Everyone here is counting on us," she said. "Let's make this count." With a deep breath, the Calathans began to chant, their voices rising in unison. Their energy swirled around them like a tempest as they drew upon their collective strength. Now the Zarkan warship fired its cannons, sending blasts of energy toward the outpost. The soldiers returned fire, attempting to hold the ship at bay. Evans motioned to her team, "Ready." The Calathans surged forward, their energy creating a brilliant shield that enveloped them as they focused their power toward the warship. The Zarkans below shouted in confusion as the energy radiated outward, creating an illusion of multiple Calathans, all striking at once. Now Evans shouted as she and the soldiers opened fire on the warship. The Zarkans were momentarily distracted by the onslaught of fire from the ground, allowing the Calathans to build their energy into a concentrated blast. As the Zarkan warship hovered low, its cannons charged. Evans felt a sense of urgency build within her. "Together now," the Calathan leader shouted. With one final push, the Calathans unleashed a blinding surge of energy, aimed directly at the Zarkan ship. The ground shook with the force of their combined effort, and Evans watched in awe as the beam of light struck the ship. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the air. The Zarkan warship shuddered as the energy ripped through its shields and ignited a series of explosions. The Zarkans aboard yelled in panic as the ship spiraled out of control. "It's working," Evans shouted. The Zarkan soldiers below began to retreat, their formation breaking as chaos erupted around them. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining Zarkan soldiers regrouped quickly, realizing they were losing ground, and fury replaced confusion. "They're coming back," the sergeant warned, snapping Evans back to reality. The Calathans were visibly drained, their energy flickering dangerously low, but their determination remained unyielding. "We can do this," the leader urged. Evans glanced around the battlefield. The soldiers were rallying, but they needed more time, more distractions to keep the Zarkans at bay. "We need to hold them off long enough for the Calathans to recharge," Evans shouted to her team. "We'll create a barrier," the Calathan leader said, its voice steady despite its fatigue. "If we can gather more energy, we can block their advance." "All right," Evans replied, "we'll cover you." As the Zarkan soldiers began their assault again, the humans positioned themselves at the entrance of the outpost, ready to defend their newfound allies. With renewed determination, the Calathans formed a circle, their hands clasped tightly together. They drew upon the energy of the earth around them, channeling it into a protective barrier that shimmered with brilliance. Evans braced herself for the incoming attack. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the sounds of war. But as long as they stood together, she knew they had a chance to turn the tide against the Zarkan Empire. The tension in the air was palpable as Evans and her team prepared to face the renewed assault of the Zarkan soldiers. The Calathans huddled together, their small forms glowing faintly as they pooled their remaining energy to create a protective barrier. The outpost's entrance became a fierce battleground, a testament to the strength of an unlikely alliance. Evans could see the determination in the eyes of her soldiers, each one steeling themselves for the fight ahead. "We've come too far to give up now," she thought as she gripped her weapon tighter and positioned herself at the front lines. The Zarkan soldiers advanced with calculated precision, their dark armor glinting ominously in the fading light. The soldiers shouted commands, their voices laced with fury and contempt. "Form a line," the sergeant barked as he positioned his men behind makeshift cover. "Keep your focus on their leaders." As the Zarkan troops approached, the air grew thick with tension. The Calathan's barrier shimmered in response to their concentration, but Evans could see that their strength was waning. "Keep it together," she urged the Calathans. "You're doing great." The leader met her gaze and nodded, but the strain was evident on its features. "We can't hold this for long." "We just need a little more time," Evans replied, glancing back at the outpost soldiers who were frantically preparing their defenses. Then the first volley of energy blasts erupted from the Zarkon, ranks lighting up the darkening sky with brilliant flashes of color. Evans yelled and returned fire with her team. Their bullets ricocheted off the Zarkon armor, creating a harsh clatter as they battled back against the wave of soldiers. "Hold your ground," she shouted at the top of her lungs. The Calathans chanted louder, their voices blending into a powerful resonance that filled the air with energy. The barrier flickered and flared brightly, absorbing the incoming blasts. The Zarkons faltered momentarily, but the sheer number of their forces kept advancing. A Zarkon soldier broke through the line, aiming directly at Evans, but before it could fire, the Calathan leader unleashed a burst of energy that knocked the soldier off balance, sending it sprawling to the ground. "Nice shot," Evans called back, grinning in relief. But the reprieve was short-lived as more Zarkons surged forward, taking advantage of the gap. Evans adjusted her aim and took out another Zarkon soldier as she heard the sergeant shouting for a strategic retreat into the outpost. "Fall back to the entrance," he commanded. "Move." Evans quickly motioned for the Calathans to retreat as well. The barrier wavered, but held as they fell back into the relative safety of the outpost. Once inside, the soldiers regrouped, their expressions grim but resolute. "We can't keep this up forever," the sergeant said, panting. "We need a plan." The Calathan leader took a moment to catch its breath, its oversized eyes scanning the group. "We have knowledge of Zarkon technology. We can create an EMP pulse that will disable their weapons and disrupt their systems." Evans felt a flicker of hope rekindling within her. "But can you do it here?" "Yes, but we will need a moment to prepare," the leader replied. "We can channel our energy into the systems of the outpost." "Do it," Evans ordered as the Zarkons prepared for their next assault. The Calathans moved swiftly to the control panel of the outpost and began their work. Evans positioned her team around them, weapons raised ready to protect their newfound allies. The Zarkon soldiers approached again, but this time there was a determination in their eyes. They were more focused and resolute, preparing for a final assault. "Get ready," Evans warned as the Zarkons broke through the trees. Just as the first wave of energy bolts erupted toward the outpost, the Calathans released their gathered energy, creating a brilliant pulse that rippled through the air. The Zarkon soldiers faltered as the pulse struck their weapons, sending arcs of electricity racing along their armor, disabling their systems. The soldiers shouted in confusion and frustration as they struggled to regain control. Now Evans shouted, opening fire at the disoriented Zarkons. With renewed vigor, the humans charged forward, their spirits lifted by the tide of battle turning in their favor. The Zarkon soldiers staggered under the combined assault of Evans's team, and the Calathans, who surged forward, their energy flaring brightly as they rallied together. "We are more than just prey," the Calathan leader cried out, its voice ringing with conviction. Evans felt a surge of adrenaline as they pressed the attack. Zarkons fell back, their formation breaking as confusion reigned. "Push them back," Evans urged. "We can't let them regroup." As the Calathans and humans fought side by side, the tide of battle shifted dramatically. The Zarkons struggled to regain their footing, facing an onslaught that they had not anticipated. In that moment, Evans realized they had transformed from mere survivors into warriors united against a common enemy. "We can win this," she thought as she fought back the oncoming wave of Zarkons with renewed strength and determination. The tide of battle surged in favor of the Alliance as Evans and her team pressed the attack, their spirits buoyed by the unexpected success against the Zarkon forces. The air crackled with energy, both from the Calathans' unleashed power and the sporadic blasts from the humans' weapons. Evans could see that the Zarkon soldiers were reeling, their cohesion shattered by the combined might of the outpost's defenders and their newfound allies. "Keep pushing forward," she shouted, urging her team onward. The Zarkon soldiers stumbled as they tried to regroup, but the relentless assault from Evans's team kept them off balance. The Calethans were relentless, darting in and out of the fray, their energy crackling like static as they confused and misdirected the enemy. "We cannot let them gain ground," the Calathan leader called out, its voice filled with urgency. A Zarkan commander appeared in the chaos, rallying his troops with a fierce shout, "We will not fall to these inferior beings." But the commander's confidence was faltering as more of his soldiers fell to the ground, either incapacitated by the humans' fire or confused by the Calathan's illusions. Evans spotted an opening and took aim at the commander. He was a figurehead, a symbol of their oppression. If they could take him down, it might shatter the Zarkan's morale. But just as she was about to pull the trigger, the commander turned his gaze toward her, and she felt a chill run down her spine. "Aim for the core," Evans shouted to her team. "He's the one keeping them organized." A soldier beside her nodded, and they both fired in unison. The blast struck the Zarkan commander, knocking him backward, but he regained his footing with surprising speed. He raised his weapon, aiming directly at Evans, but before he could fire, the Calathan leader unleashed a powerful burst of energy that enveloped the commander in blinding light. The commander staggered and fell as the light dissipated, leaving him dazed and vulnerable. Now Evans yelled as she and her team charged forward. With the Zarkan commander down, the remaining soldiers lost their resolve. Their formation crumbled as they turned to flee into the depths of the forest. The battle was theirs. "We did it," one of the soldiers shouted, disbelief and relief flooding their voice. But Evans knew that they couldn't let their guard down just yet. The Zarkans were notorious for regrouping and launching surprise counterattacks. "Secure the perimeter," Evans commanded as they fanned out around the outpost. The Calathans gathered together, their energy beginning to flicker and dim as they caught their breath. "We are grateful," the leader said, its voice weak, but filled with gratitude. "You have fought bravely." "We wouldn't be here without you," Evans replied, feeling a wave of camaraderie swell between them. As the humans secured the area, the outpost guards began to assess the damage and tend to the wounded. "We need to alert command," Evans said, turning to the sergeant who was already on the radio relaying the details of the battle. While they waited for a response, Evans turned to the Calathan leader. "You fought valiantly today. You showed us what true strength looks like." The leader bowed its head. "Thank you. It is our duty to protect our kind and those who offer us sanctuary." Just then a crackling voice came through the radio. "This is command. We've detected unusual activity in your area, and we're dispatching reinforcements." Evans felt a wave of relief wash over her. "We need to prepare for their arrival," the sergeant said, glancing around the outpost. But the Calathan leader raised its hand. "We must make it clear to your command that we are allies. Now we seek refuge, not just from the Zarkans, but a partnership." Evans nodded, feeling the gravity of the moment. It was not just about surviving the battle. It was about forging the new future together. The soldiers quickly gathered to discuss their next steps as the Calathans shared their knowledge about the Zarkan Empire, their technology and tactics. As they worked together, Evans felt a sense of hope blossoming within her. This alliance could change everything. Hours later, as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the sounds of additional vehicles could be heard approaching the outpost. "Reinforcements are here," Evans called out, feeling a renewed sense of determination. As the vehicles pulled up, soldiers poured out ready for action, but Evans raised her hands in a sign of peace. "We're safe now," she announced to the newcomers. And with that, they prepared to welcome their new allies, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united against the Zarkan Empire. As the sun rose, the future felt uncertain, but for the first time, it also felt promising. An alliance forged in the fires of battle would stand as a beacon of hope against the darkness that threatened to consume them all.